Notebook on Cities and Culture's Korea Tour is brought to you by Daniel Murphy, David Hayes, and Polar Inertia Journal, an outlet for artists and researchers documenting the urban condition at polarinertia.com. So what kind of foreign literature do Koreans like to read?
Well, that's a tough one to start with. They like to read the foreign authors they already know, like authors that who hit it big once, and then probably Koreans buy their books again and again.
Like what names?
Yeah, well, I'm thinking of the big name who's one of the, like, if you look at the polls about the favorite foreign authors, he's always within the top three. Is Bernard Werber. He's a French science fiction author, and he happens to be the best-selling author in the company I'm working for. And honestly, without him, we wouldn't be very, very far. We couldn't really publish as many stuff as we would. So he's almost like a star here. And then another big name is a lot of literature from Japan is popular. Murakami Haruki is one of the really big names. Like he doesn't have one publisher, so publisher for every new book fights and put a lot of money on the table to get the rights for that one.
I've bought Korean language books of his because I can't read Japanese so well, but Korean I can read him in, and there's more books in Korean of his than in English.
Yeah, everything he wrote has been translated, I would say, and pretty successfully. I don't know exactly why. I don't know I still, part of my work is trying to understand the tastes and what Koreans are looking for in literature, and I think I still don't know.
It's a complete mystery.
It's a complete mystery to me. But I'm trying to look for other big names. I think Alain de Botton is pretty famous here as well, and pretty.
I have friends who bring him up, and then I mention I've interviewed him, and they're all very excited.
Yes, they must be. Yeah. So. Yeah, actually, right now, foreign literature is not very big. But then, of course, the big names, always even the big bestsellers abroad, eventually always made it to Korean, but not with a regular success. Like you have really big successes abroad that really don't catch up here, and the other way around. I would say Bernard Werber is not selling as much as in other countries as he is in Korea.
They like him here.
They like him here. They liked his first book, and they're very loyal. So they keep on. He's like a brand. So they know his name, and they give it a try for the next book and the next book and the next book. So I'm not saying he's keeping his fan base intact every time, but still there's a new generation of readers, and because of their parents were reading Bernard Werber, they started reading Bernard Werber, and it's a pretty young readership. I mean, I would say mostly students and school students and university students like him. Haruki Murakami, I wouldn't know exactly why he's so popular here. I'm looking for other names. Maybe a bit later I will remember.
Right. Both of these guys I should be reading more of so I can understand this country better, which is, by the way, Korea. We're sitting in Seoul, Korea, above Itaewon, on Notebook on Cities and Culture today, where I'm speaking with Gregory Limpens. He is the acquiring editor at Open Books. What does Open Books do?
We do foreign literature, fiction, non-fiction, art books, design books, all kinds. It's a trade publisher founded about 30 years ago, and it's an independent publisher. And the core business, I would say, is introducing new authors from all countries around the world to Koreans. Big names we have in our catalogue are Umberto Eco and Paul Auster and Patrick Suskind. Also a lot of British authors who are big names in the UK but not big sellers here, like Julian Barnes and Sebastian Faulks, Jan Banks. So it's a particularity. A lot of our competitors or other publishers who are much bigger than us, they do a lot of Korean literature as well, which we don't. We don't do that. We
exclusively the outside world's literature brought to Korea.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Now, how did you get from growing up in Belgium to be bringing world literature to Korea?
Well, that would be a long story to tell, but I suppose what got me much closer to my employer today is coming to Korea for a completely different kind of work. I'm a lawyer. I studied law and started practicing trademark law, and I got a chance one day to come. Well, I looked for a chance, and I took it to come practice trademark law here in Korea.
Which you already wanted to come to Korea.
Yeah, I wanted to come to Korea. I had been here. I have traveled here, and I liked it a lot. So I wanted to go in another country for a working experience, and Korea was one of my choices. And after a few interviews, I got one that worked out, and I ended up working 2 years in a law firm doing trademark law here, which was really great as a working experience, but I didn't see me continuing doing that because it was pretty repetitive and it was pretty demanding. It was working very, very long hours, and
you couldn't envision an entire career in Korea doing that same thing.
No, exactly, and I think I would have gone crazy at some point or the other. And I liked Korea a lot, so I thought, okay, it's time for me to take a break, and I took that break here in Korea, traveling and learning the language. And then I naturally wanted to, after learning language, I wanted to stay a bit more because I wanted to harvest the fruits of my efforts, so to say. Because the more you learn, the better it is to stay here. So, so what I did is try to find a job in fields that I liked, and I tried in cinema and publishing, and the most interesting possibility I got was in publishing, and this is where I still am, like 6 years later.
What is it about those first impressions of Korea you had that made you desire to live here?
Oh wow, that was as early as when I was traveling. Yeah, the first impression was Seoul itself, the huge city, dynamic. It was my first time in Asia, so it's not difficult to imagine how it was impressive. I mean, I come from Belgium. The largest city is 1 million inhabitants. It's like the province, and so it's the life here is so much more like urban and compact and dynamic, as I said, and all of that I found it really, really impressive and very regenerating in a way, because I like cities. I liked cities already. So I remember having visited here and thought, wow, it would be really cool to give it a try and live here, one of those 20 million inhabitants, and going my way every day and among them. So I think it stuck somewhere in my head, and then later on when it became a concrete possibility for me to go abroad, then I thought of Korea.
And in Belgium, as I understand it, from what I know anyway, it's the environment, the built environment's fairly historical looking there, whereas here they can't stop pushing forward and making things seem newer and newer and newer. I mean, how does that strike you, that they build so differently here, that things are so future oriented here?
Belgium is it's more like you have a few apartments in the center, but there's a lot of houses, and there's this specific Brussels house, but also what you call Brusselization, which is like a mix of old and new, and usually pretty ugly.
They call that Brusselization.
Yeah, it's an architectural term. I've been told. So now I think it got much better in Brussels. I really love Brussels. I really love the city. But coming here, I realized, wow, there's almost nothing is old here, and I don't think the architecture up to maybe a few years ago, the architecture was not meant to be spectacular, and it's not. It's most of it relatively like
24-story apartment towers.
Yeah, yes, and I think it's in the Korean mentality not to want to distinguish oneself too much by external signs of wealth, or like huge, like higher buildings or something. So high rises here, of course, there's plenty, but they're not building like, oh, we want to be the highest, and they do that in Dubai, and here I found it, to be very honest, I found it pretty ugly in a way, but that became a form of beauty, because it was still so exotic to me, and those buildings with with almost no, almost nondescript architecture, and almost nothing special. Or maybe what was special about them to me was that they looked like plastic made, or they had those round corners, and they look a bit cheaply made, but still, like the mass of them and the whole concrete sea they form, I found it amazing. And especially when you go up the Namsan and you go to Namsan Tower, you see how spread Seoul is, and the only places you see where there's no building are the mountains themselves. There's barely parks, and just to see the mountains, and behind the mountains there's more concrete. And well, I suppose after a while it can get on your nerves, but it hasn't gotten on my nerves yet. And I really like this density. And then I don't think Seoul is futuristic. Well, although right now, like, there's a trend, like the design Seoul trend and so on. You see this new building by Zaha Hadid in Dongdaemun. It's a relatively new trend from like 5 or 6 years ago. They started making landmarks, and that was not the case before, I think. You had a few ones along the Hangang, the 63 building and so on, and now, and maybe because now it's becoming more individualistic, and maybe it's being reflected also in the big architectural projects they're having. But before, I don't like. I used to give you an example. I used to work in the law firm that's the largest law firm in Korea, and they were not in one big building or something, although they could afford it, but they were like spread in small buildings and so on. And I think I heard one day one of my senior colleagues saying, it's really not the style of the house, like to want to have a spectacular office and to show off or anything. And I thought, well, this is something that would apply to a lot of things in Korean society. You don't really want to show off. Now it's started changing. People want to buy foreign cars. Right. People want to do this and that show that they're different. But before that, it was just like, everybody, same type of car, same type of life, and same type of holidays, and not trying to shout a bit louder than the next guy.
How else was it different almost 10 years ago when you got here? How was Korean society noticeably different, or even just the look and feel of Seoul? Do you think much has changed since you got here?
I think in overall it hasn't changed so much, but I can make a list of places I can remember having changed concretely, but overall it hasn't changed so much. And society is changing very, very fast. I know that. That's a very tough question. I would say yes, it is changing because new generation doesn't live the same way as 10 years ago, I think. But then 10 years ago, I didn't know Korea as well as I know now. So I wouldn't be able, maybe, you have to ask me the question in 10 years, and then I will tell you how it changed. But then the physiognomy of Seoul itself, like the buildings and neighborhoods, that I can tell you more, because I've seen neighborhoods being completely torn down, and new high rises, and sometimes they're good projects, sometimes less good projects.
You work very quickly here. In Western Europe, it's a lot harder to tear something down, especially like a neighborhood, and build something iconic in like the space of a year, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's really, really fast, and well, it's sometimes a bit too too fast, and this is one of the problems of the Korean society that has been put into a pretty sad light with the Seoul disaster, because it shows a lot of things in Korea that are working a bit too roughly, a bit too approximately, and maybe not enough planning, not enough safety, and so yes, but still, this is the modus operandi here. It's just how things have been changing so fast. And this is how they are so competitive and dynamic. So yeah.
Now you came here without knowing any Korean language at all. Is that if that's true? Was it that? Did you get any help from the fact that you come from a country where multilingualism is common?
I suppose it did help, but I was really surprised how difficult Korea was. So I learned that I would go to Korea, so I started learning the Hangul, the 26 characters. That's the easy part. And then when you come here, you think, okay, well, as a Belgian, I was pretty optimistic. I thought, okay, I'm going to live there. I'm going to try to spend as much time as possible with Koreans if I can, and not hang around only with foreigners, and then so after 6 months I will be able to speak more or less good. That was my very naive approach when I arrived, and I thought, because that's what happens when you go to Spain. I knew it would be more difficult than Spanish, but still I thought, okay, immersion, a few months, and then I will be able to sustain small talk and so on. But it wasn't the case, because after 6 months I had been working and I didn't have as much time as I wanted to study, so I was nowhere. I was nowhere near where I thought I would be, and maybe after 2 years I was I had reached a level that I found acceptable, and I realized also that I needed study time. I know some people can just go approach it and go the cowboy way, and then just like get new words and grasp some grammar just by being in the streets and talking with people. But that was not the case. I really needed the study in a book time, and that's what I did after 2 years only. And so yeah, that's where really my Korean knowledge took off. And I realized how little I knew. Yes. And then after I finished a whole, I stayed 3 semesters at the Yonsei Korean Language Institute, and I thought, well, when I'm done with this, I'll be good. But then when I was done with it, I didn't think I was good, and I thought that I had so much to do. And
your idea of good, it keeps changing, it keeps moving up.
Exactly. There's the metaphor, this. It's like a large vase. Where the bottom is narrow and the edges go larger and larger. So when you in the beginning the water that's falls in the jar, it goes high pretty quickly, but then very soon it seems that it's not moving at all. And that's what I feel now. I feel I'm not really learning more, because I don't take time to learn. So what I know, and it's enough to me. But then I don't really get beyond that.
Right. Now, you bring foreign literature into Korea, but has reading Korean literature at all been a part of your study of the language, or has reading any books in Korean been a way that you've learned?
It hasn't. No, it hasn't. And now it's really not part of my job, because of the job I'm doing, I get like manuscripts and manuscripts. We don't publish books that haven't been published abroad, but I get materials, reading materials every day, and they're all like in English or in French or in German or languages I can read. I wouldn't say I'm a good Korean reader. I can read a book in Korean, but I've never made the effort of reading a big book in Korean. Although I know a lot of people who did it, and I kind of envy them, because I never took the time, and I'm sure my Korean would improve if I did that. But right now, it's really not part of my priorities because of work. The time I spend at the office and outside of the office is basically I have to focus on foreign literature, and if possible, books that haven't been published in Korea yet. So there used to be a distinction, like what I used to, every candidate for me to read, I used to make a little research to see whether it's been published or not. Now I'm trying not to do that, because if there's a book I really want to read, I don't want to care whether it's been out or in Korean or not. But
give yourself the chance not to read it.
Exactly. I mean, if I want to read Moby Dick, I'm not gonna not read it because it's been translated into Korean. Right. But no. So I'm pretty ashamed to say it, but I'm very, very bad. I'm not knowledgeable at all in Korean literature. I know a few big names because it's the field I work in, but I haven't read them, and yeah.
Even so, the Korean people themselves are pretty encouraging, no matter what method you use to learn. Right? Nobody is discouraging about learning Korean, right?
No, nobody is discouraging, and they're really well. There's this way of being like over emphatic about like you say thank you, and it's like, oh, your Korean is great. It's and I would say I had that in the beginning, and I have it much less now, because now that I'm for a foreigner, I have a decent level. Now they don't say anymore because they think, oh, maybe if I say something, the guy will be vexed because I'm not supposed to say anything. No, but I used to find it very encouraging myself. Sometimes a bit embarrassing because I didn't think it was justified. But it is definitely something I would say about Koreans, and not only about their reaction to the way people speak their language, is that they're very positive, encouraging and positive, and they try to see the good the good side of things and build from there.
I've spoken to Americans here who talk about the ways that Koreans expect them to be Americans, and I've spoken to Englishmen who say that Koreans have certain expectations of Englishmen. Do they have any idea of what a Belgian is like? Do they expect certain things of you as a Belgian?
I don't think they had, and I just they used to see me as a foreigner. They still see me as a foreigner, and this is kind of a win-win situation for the foreigner because if you do something really well according to their standard, they will say, "Wow, this is great. He's foreigner, but he does that really well. Whether it's speaking or doing something you're supposed to do or whatever." And then if you don't do that thing well, then they will say, well, it's okay, he's a foreigner, so, it's okay, you can't expect everything. So no
matter what, there's a good reason they have for it.
Exactly, and I think there's kind of a positive prejudice towards foreigners, but I wouldn't say that applies to all kinds of foreigners. That's maybe more like a dark side of Korean society, but I would say maybe if I was Chinese or if I was from Africa, I wouldn't talk like that. I don't know. I've heard and maybe experienced myself a few moments where I could tell that there's definitely a favored attitude towards Caucasians,
or even just Westerners in general.
Westerners in general, yeah. But I think it's not just proper to Korea. I've heard people say that in Japan, or also in China, they think they are superior, and then the Western are just superior as well, but not as superior as they are, and then the rest, and then it goes down so.
Everyone else below them,
and the other Asians, and then
sure.
So there is some kind of maybe some kind of fantasy about the Westerners, Caucasians, especially white people. I don't know exactly. It's deeply rooted probably, and it's probably changing as well. That's encouraging. Yeah.
Now, we just had the Seoul International Book Fair go on. It ended a few days ago as of this recording. What happens at that book fair?
Well, I suppose it's pretty much the same as other book fairs. You have main publishers that present their books. They have their booths, stands there with, and I would say a particularity of the Seoul Book Fair is that, well, it is international by name, and of course they have a guest country every year, and they have attendance and some foreign authors invited by different cultural centers and so on. But it's not very, very international in the sense that large majority of attendants, of course, are Korean, and a large majority of the stands and professionals meeting there are Koreans. It's also very much sales oriented, so Koreans go there to buy books, usually at a discount.
Just for their own personal libraries?
Yeah, exactly. And also because, well, the entrance fees, the admission fee is very cheap. It's it's less than $3, I think. And then they can go there and get 20, 30, 40, 50% discounts on books. So a lot of people go on a spree buying lots of books. And if you buy it to a certain amount, logistics in Korea is very well made. So if you buy it for a certain amount, that you can get it delivered, by Taekbei, by courier.
One of the handy things about Korea is the country is small enough. Anybody gets delivery of anything.
That's true. And that's why also the book trade itself, about 40% is books bought online.
Oh, really?
So there's no Amazon Korea, but there's a lot of small retailers, and some not so small at all actually, but specialized in books or not. There's so many shopping malls and so on, and some specialized in books, and they represent about 40% of the book trade in Korea. But to get back to the book fair, yes. So I know that every year I meet professionals from agents or foreign publishers. This year there were a few Spanish and Italians and UK publishers and agents, but usually they are invited. They don't come by themselves. They are invited. The trade meets in the larger fairs like Frankfurt, London, Paris, New York, the Book Expo America. These are the main fairs where agents almost go every year to meet their colleagues and I would say the Korean Book Fair doesn't have really that function. It has the function of showing new books and introducing new books, and sometimes a new country and new literature through the guest, the country of honor.
This year, Oman.
This year, Oman. Last year, Saudi Arabia. We should take a wild guess for next year.
Yes, it could be anywhere. Qatar?
Yeah, Qatar.
Or maybe they'll change continents. Maybe it'll be Antarctica. I don't know.
I know. I really hope they change continents. I hope Brazil would be, because that would be getting back to some more literary powerhouses. There used to be France and Japan and China in the early years as a guest of honors, and I don't think Belgium will ever be. Too small and no money, but maybe Germany one day, Italy.
Yes.
Brazil or Portugal, or maybe the Lusophone countries all together. Why not? That would be a good idea. Anyway, let's see what next year has in store.
Anything's possible, but at this year's fair, I mean, I'm sure did you get the chance to meet many Korean readers, to have face-to-face chats with many just Koreans buying books, looking for books?
Yeah, I spent quite some time at the booth, at our booth, and they're all readers. But I've tried sometimes to encourage or tell them about a book I liked, but then it's not very well perceived. Like most of the time, they would not acknowledge me talking to them. I would see them looking at a book that I like and I wanted to recommend and say, oh, it's pretty good. Or whether a graphic novel, they were looking at it obviously intently, and I would say, it's a really good one. And I would say more than half of the time they pretend not to hear me, or so it's not a very maybe unlike your assumption is it's not a great way of getting to talk with the readers. Although we did have a guest from the Czech Republic. He's an author. His book was just out, translated by us, published by us, and he came invited by the Czech embassy, and we had a book launch event, not at the fair but near the fair, and there we had some attendees, and there it's easier to talk. Although when you don't know somebody and he or she hasn't been introduced to you, it's always difficult to break the ice.
Specifically in Korea, or just anywhere?
I would say more in Korea. You need to have this little ice-breaking introduction, and then things are much easier. But going towards someone who doesn't know you and talking is not something that is really well perceived. And it doesn't really. It depends on the persons always, of course. But in a lot of cases, it's not going to lead anywhere.
It won't turn into a conversation. I mean, I've heard Americans complain about that in Korea you can't really just talk to somebody. In Europe, can you just talk to people?
It depends. I suppose you can. It depends on you and depends on the person you're talking to.
But compared to here, it's a little bit easier.
It's much easier compared to here. I would say here I get foreigners talking to me when they want me to go to their church or something like that. That's another part of things. They want you to welcome Jesus or anyway whatever. They approach you for some religious or some kind of campaign they're making, and then they would talk to you, but then they have, it's not a equal to equal kind of talk. It's more like they want something from you, so
right, exactly.
It's a bit different. Yeah,
I've heard a similar story from Koreans here. It's like they have foreigners talk to them, but it's come to our English language meeting. By the way, we're going to be talking about the church the whole time, but I guess it's still language practice.
Yes, language practice, but maybe it's not the practice you want to have.
That's true.
That's. But I did make friends here randomly too, so it is possible. And a way would be I would say a really good way for somebody you don't know to start talking to you is when they feel they can help, because they're very, very helpful people. So they would see you're obviously you're lost or you might be lost, and then somebody would come and talk to you, and that happened to me a few times, and it even led to friendships in a couple of times. So It's something that is not rare at all. If the person is confident enough to be talking to you in English, because they obviously they see you're a foreigner and they will stop. But if they're playful about like their English even not being so good, but they want to give it a try, or if they're confident with their English, they will come and help you. And sometimes people, the reason people want to try to help you is because they want to speak in English. That's that's different. But most of the time, it's a genuine desire to help, or to be nice, or to make you have a better time.
I hear from Korean friends that Korean English education has some problems, like there's not a lot of opportunities to practice, so that's why they have to get practice where they can if they're inclined to do that, speaking. But that it's okay with reading and writing and things like that. Do you have a sense of if Korean readers read a lot of non-translated fiction as well? Or not even just fiction, but just books? Are they picking up a lot of English books and reading them, or are they in the main waiting for translations?
I have the feeling that if it's not for you have the type of Korean who are very, very good in English, and then they would not wait for the translation. But most Koreans still don't feel so, even if they can speak, they don't feel so comfortable. And I would say it's the same with me. I'm pretty comfortable with speaking Korean, but reading Korean I'm not. And I would do that only if I really want to get to an untranslated, unchanged text, then I would read in Korean. Otherwise, I would never read a book in Korean that's a translation from a language that I know.
Right.
And
why would you?
Well, no, why would I? But no, I know people who do that. They don't like. I know a Murakami fan who started reading the Korean translation because he couldn't wait for the English translation.
Well, I've done that too, but that's because I don't know Japanese that well. Like, if I could read the Japanese, I would, but I can't. So the Korean's the next one down.
Yeah. Okay. Well, me too. If I cannot read the original language, I would try to find the next better language. But I wouldn't do that with Korean because they would take me too much time. And so I would say they are waiting for translations a lot, or they would read in English because they have to for school, or because their major. I think they do a lot. They do get a lot of reading materials at university that are in English, and I think a lot of them are really good English readers. But for their own enjoyment and leisure reading time, I don't think they will read a lot in English, and I would think they would. I would think they would tend to wait for the translation. Yeah.
So if we take Korean out of the picture, what are your favorite languages to read in?
I think it's French. It's my mother language. It's the one I'm most confident with, comfortable with. But I think I would say I like to read. Whenever I can, I like to read in the original language. Well, I only have I don't have so many languages I can do that in. But if I can give it a try in Spanish, my Spanish is not really good. But if the novel doesn't seem to be too difficult, I would read a novel in Spanish. If I think I can, and because I know how much distortion there is in translation. However good the translation.
You become very familiar with that concept of loss in translation.
Yes, exactly, and I'm very aware of how difficult it is, and that a translation is actually rewriting. It's another type of work. But if I'm interested in a work and I can get to it directly, then I would. Yeah. But the French, to reply to your question, French is the most comfortable language for me.
And it's one of the languages in Europe whose literature is most admired. So that doesn't hurt either, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of production in French in France every year, and I can tell. Also, I think after English, it's the most translated language in the world.
Oh, really?
So there is the French have this what they call l'exception française, exception culturelle française, and I think they do a lot to maintain that. Like if you see the French Institut Français, the French Institute here in Korea, they're very active and they have a budget. Everyone complains always that there's no money for culture, and I think there's not enough money for culture. But the French they put the bar pretty high, and so they have a vision and a policy of promoting French language and French literature around the world, and I think they do that relatively well. Not always perfectly, but relatively well. And I love the French language, so I'm really happy about what the French are doing to promote their language.
Purely out of curiosity, do you meet many Korean French speakers?
Yes, surprisingly a lot, especially women. Obviously, it's a no-brainer. The first language they learn is English. And then, of course, a lot of Koreans learn Japanese and Chinese. And I would say French is this, in the non-Asiatic languages, French is the second language that is the most widely learned.
Did they say why they choose it?
Usually, I suppose at school they had to choose between different second languages and so on, and then because there is a good image about France, and France is like, it's fashion, luxury, good taste, gastronomy, sometimes design as well. Well, Italy is a contender as well, but anyway, they have this set of ideas about France that are
you
just
see them in all the French-themed cafes, right?
Exactly. So many names, so many brands. And you have the same phenomenon in Japan. I think there's a lot of chains and restaurants, of course, but also like boutique and all kinds of businesses that they want to get the French touch. And it's the same here in Korea. It might be a bit annoying because it kills the exotic vibe you might expect to get, and in Seoul there's a Starbucks on every corner, so you don't really wait for that Korean touch anymore. But the French is I think it's a very largely French is largely studied and to some extent understood. Like I've met so many really good French speakers here in Korea.
Are there any Belgian cafes here? I wondered about that.
I know of a few Belgian restaurants. I mean, I know of one if you want to eat mussels. Belgian cafes, I wouldn't say, but there's been a trend now. It's probably faded a bit, but there was a trend of Belgian waffles.
Really? It must have been pretty amusing to you.
Not really, because I'm kind of used to it, and I know it's not the same kind of waffle, so I would be a bit pretty distant about it.
What would be wrong with a Korean Belgian waffle that's right at a Belgian waffle with a Belgian waffle at home?
No, usually the dough they use is different, and then they put all kinds of toppings on it that don't really belong there. It's the same with pastry. There's always a little
pizza or anything.
Yes, exactly. There's always something too much that doesn't belong there. To get back to the waffle, I know of a Belgian guy having started a business. His name is Didier, and he had those shops, Didier Waffles. I don't know if they're there anymore. I don't know what happened to them. But yes, so they are like there's this little Belgian brand that you can, of course, Belgian beer, Belgian chocolate. Now Godiva has opened stores and so on. But that's something that Belgian is used to wherever he or she goes around the world.
You expect to see these things.
Yeah, yes, exactly, yeah.
So given all those images you enjoyed of Seoul when you first came here and wanted to live here, how has life in Seoul compared to the way you imagined it?
Actually, I was not very imaginative about my life, what would be my life in Seoul. I knew it would be very different from what I knew, and I was open to give it a try for at least 2 years, because that was my contract. It said 2 years on my contract, so I knew that would be the minimum stay I would be in. And then as soon as I arrived, I had to start working, and I didn't really have time to think too much about what was going on. I stayed in a hotel for a few days until they found me a place to stay, and I started working literally I started working 2 days after I arrived, and so I really didn't have time to look back and think, oh, okay, this is different than what I thought. And in the beginning, you see all the differences at the surface, but I was not even 30 at the time, so I was really very in a very adaptive mood. I was going with the flow, and everything was fine. And then after a while, you actually realize everything that all that is so similar with what you already know. What strikes you first is the difference, and then you realize that people have the same aspirations or the same hopes, and so that was also something that struck me after some time. I've had one tough moment of homesickness when I was sick and I was alone, and I basically felt the need to write kind of a love letter to all my friends all together, and then I never did that after that anymore. But
only one moment of homesickness in 10 years, though. That's pretty good.
Yeah, it was the first year, and it was one big. Okay, maybe I've had. Of course, there's a lot of moments where I miss being with the family and other people, but there, one big moment of deep homesickness where I was thinking, what am I doing here? It didn't happen after that, and the more I'm here, the more I'm adapted, and in a way I know why I stay. I know what makes me stay, so there's no surprise. In the beginning, it was just like discovering. It was like a roller coaster ride, socially, professionally. I was like discovering new stuff and new people all the time, so I didn't really have time to take any step back and think, okay, how is this going?
Yes, right. But at some point you do get the chance to assess it, don't you? You can, after a certain number of months, years, how long before you can step back and just see how it is going?
No, I knew pretty soon that I liked it, and I knew it was because for me life was easy here because I had a job, and then if you have a job and you don't really worry about how to pay your rent, then there's so much like to do outside of work. It's such a fun place to be, to work hard and play hard, and
that seems to be the Korean way.
Yeah, it is definitely, and you can get tired of that as well. And I got tired of noraebang, the karaoke's and so on. But so I knew very soon that I liked it, and then the assessments I've been making after that is that, okay, why do I like it? And there is always enough reasons for me to stay, and those reasons have changed.
How are they different then and now?
Well, in the beginning, I wanted to stay because I found the society and the life outside of work so exciting, and whereas now, for instance, it's work that I find most exciting because
the work took over from the play.
Yeah, exactly, right. Well, I still like the play, but my best friends are very busy, so I don't see them very often, and I'm myself busy, and I want to be busy. So, but then over the years, there's been many reasons why I started. I got this confirmation that Korea was a good place for me to be, and obviously there's things you feel at first place. When you stay a full year in a place, you know what kind of climate it is, you know what the four seasons are like. Of course,
summer and winter are fairly harsh here, as I understand it. But it's summer now, and it's not terrible, but it could get worse.
It will get worse after the rainy season. You'll see if you're still here, you'll see how hard it is. But I pretty much enjoy all moments of the year. I'm happy that winters are not longer than they are, and I'm happy that's the same with summer. But I really enjoy the diversity, and then of course one obvious point as well is the food, the diversity of the food, and that's something that I think on many levels Korea. I'm adapted to Korea, or Korea is adapted to me. I don't know, but it's a good match, and so like. The people, this sounds so cliche, but the people, the food, the climate, and there's a lot of things I really don't like in the Korean culture, but I don't have to take them in. For instance, K-pop. I'm not into K-pop, but I don't have to listen to K-pop. But yeah, if I go shopping somewhere, I will listen to it. But that's just background music, so that's fine.
It's not on your iPod.
It's not on my iPod. And same with TV. TV is dreadful in every country in the world, and in Korea is no exception. And well, I don't have a TV for the good reason that if I had one, I would be reading less, and I'm happy without it. So there's a way as a foreigner. I think Korea allows you to take the best out of Korea without too much like pressure. Whereas if you're a Korean, you get a lot of pressure naturally from your family, from your work, from a lot of things.
So many obligations that you're not subject to.
Exactly. So I have like best of both worlds, and I'm very aware of it. And I think I was really aware almost from the beginning. After a few months, maybe when I did that first assessment, I thought, okay, this is a pretty exciting place to be, and also I'm having a pretty easy life here because I'm willing to work and I'm willing to play by the rules here. Then this is very rewarding, and I suppose that's when I will get tired of the rules here, and I know maybe there's a fair chance that I will be tired of the rules here one day. Then it will be time to go. But now it's really the work, the challenge of trying to introduce good literature to Koreans. And the first people I have to convince are my boss and my colleagues, and it's getting tougher and tougher because not so many books I've chosen are doing well. Usually they're all they've been commercial failures, to put it that way, and so
it's a gamble every time.
Yeah, it is. It is for every publisher is looking for the next big thing, and I had never been asked to find the next big thing, and now they're candidly asking me to find bestsellers. So that's a different approach, and maybe that makes me read things that I wouldn't read otherwise. But it's still very, very interesting and challenging, and it's like a dream job still every day.
How often do you read a book these days and really think strongly to yourself? You get the strong sense that Koreans would love this book?
I've lost confidence about. I in the beginning, because I loved it, or because I thought that even if I didn't love it, Koreans would love it. I was really confident, and I was like, oh, we have to do this for this and that reason. And then we did, and then it didn't sell. And there's many reasons. Maybe because maybe it's because of marketing. Maybe it's because of the cover. I don't know. Maybe it's just the wrong choice. So now that I've made so many wrong choices, if in terms of sales, what turned out to be the actual sales of the books, then I've kind of lost confidence. But still, I try to not rely on my personal taste, but you can't completely escape it. And when I think I've been reading a text that is exceptional in a way, even if it's not a way that I would like, then I would think, okay, if it's exceptional, if I can recognize it as being exceptional, then I think Korean readers would probably recognize it as being exceptional as well. And I try to take into consideration so many factors, like what I know about Korean culture, what I know about Korean interests, what I know about Korean history, and maybe there's things that I know Europeans are very interested in and Koreans less. So I try to compute that in, and I know that I'm not a good computer. I don't have all the data, but that's what I'm trying to do. And then in the beginning, I was just like doing the research by myself, and I had just to convince my boss. Now it's a bit more difficult. I have to convince more people, and so there's more talking involved, and then so they veto a lot of books that I present. But it's fair enough. I mean, this is how it should be, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
What's an example of something you can be at least fairly confident about that Korean readers are interested in more than European readers? You talk about things that this interests Europeans more, this interests Korean more. What's the kind of thing that you think probably interests Koreans more than other groups, other nationalities, other societies?
Well, I could answer negatively. I could say what interests them less.
Yes. Well, what interests them less?
Well, obviously, like there's books about the Holocaust coming out every week in France and even in the US, I guess. Middle East problems and Afghanistan. Obviously, because people feel connected to those because they know people who've been there, or it's part of their past or even their present. I mean, Hitler is still a big name in Europe for many reasons. There's this book called Look Who's Back, and it's about like Hitler coming, like awakening in today's Germany, and realizing so many Turks and so on and so on and so on. And it's been a huge success in Germany, and it's being translated around the world now. And I think it's going to be translated in Korean, but not by us. And I don't know. I might be completely wrong, but I don't think this will work because of there's a set of references that is different, and there's a lot of things we know as a basis. We have a basic knowledge of the conflict in the Middle East, although it's very, very complicated, and there's only a few people who really understand what's going on. But still, we are familiar with those topics and different wars and so on. And in Korea, they're less interested. I would say what works now in Korea is some kind of like some kind of fables for adults, like some stories that have a message, a strong message to it. Not necessarily moral message, but something that people can really relate to, and not something that is lecturing about a very tough social issue, a historic issue, but something that is more like an allegory of what life can be and what maybe the reader's life can be. And I should have answered your question by saying, actually, I don't know. Because I turned it in a way that I could answer negatively, but positively, I'm not sure. I'm really not sure.
Do you have, when you were talking to Korean friends, having conversations with them, are they often conversations about books?
Necessarily through work, because a lot of my friends I've met through work, like they're ex-colleagues or... But otherwise, the other friends I've had and who are not work-related, we seldom talk about books.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Because I was wondering what the difference in sort of the type of conversation about books you would be between talking to European friends and Korean friends. I mean, would you call those types of conversations essentially the same, or is there a difference between the way you would talk about books with somebody Korean and the way you would with somebody who's, a German, say?
It always depends. You have to adapt in a way that if based on the idea of you have what the other person knows. So if you know that it's a well-read person, he or she's into a certain type of books, and you feel confident talking about those books, then you talk about that. But in Korea, it's always about, I don't want to start making name dropping because it wouldn't work, and I would have an expressive face, and or it would be so boring for the person I'm talking to. So if I start talking about books that we publish, but that the person I'm talking to is not familiar with, then I'd better not talk about it. Or of course, book recommendations, and then it goes through a present. Like I bring the book and I tell the person why I brought the book, why I think that person should read it, and usually they do read it. And if they don't get it, then they will tell you, you know what, I read the book you gave me, but I really don't understand. But it's okay. No, so yeah, I have very different conversations, but I wouldn't say I would talk about literature with all my foreign friends as well. It's more like, it's not a cultural thing, it's more like a personal thing.
Right.
Yeah.
What are some of speaking of things personal, what are some of your personal favorite books Open Books has brought to Korea, of the ones you've read in the original? What are some of the ones that have really appealed to your personal taste, whether or not they've been successful in Korea?
A lot of the ones we published recently are my picks, and of course there's always a reason. I can almost back them all, with a specific reason why I like them and why I thought Koreans would like them. But one of the books that was already in our catalog when I joined Open Books is Michel Houellebecq, Atomized, in French, Les Particules Élémentaires. I was really proud to know that they had published it. And then Marie Dariussec also, and Emmanuel Carrère. He's a really big name, and we continue publishing him, so I'm really proud about that. We have kind of a schizophrenic catalog. You have, especially in French literature, you have Bernard Werber on one side, and then you have Catherine Millet on the other side, and they're completely opposites. And we do literature from around the world, and I would say I was familiar with some of the big titles we had in our catalog when I joined, but there's so much I haven't read. I realized how little I had read British literature. I read more American literature, and I had read very little of British literature. Julian Barnes I hadn't read before, and so I didn't really know how to talk about those books, and I didn't really have to, actually, because they were already published. And then I came in at a moment where they were looking for publishing a lot of new books, and among those books that I brought in, that I picked up, the ones I'm really proud of, well, there's a lot. There's a Belgian author, Dimitri Verhulst, The Misfortunates. I have a special how do I say, in Korean there's this word aejeong. Aejeong means to have a special feeling or a special attachment to and yet again I have an attachment to all of the books that I picked in a way. I kind of fell in love with a novel called Brooklyn by Colin, which we published and didn't come across at all. I don't think the translation was bad. I think it's just like it's very subtle, and maybe this is not the type of stories that it's a story of an Irish girl going to New York and starting a new life there. And maybe this is kind of like immigrant story. Maybe it didn't really appeal to a lot of readers. Maybe it just came at a time where it just came unnoticed, like many books. There's so many of I know that the moment we're gonna start a new question, I'm gonna think of other books. But the two first ones that I'm thinking of, Dimitri Verhulst and Colin. Yeah.
I have to imagine. I mean, tell me if the authors who receive in the mail copies of their own book in Korean after it's been published, that must be a striking thing for a lot of them. Like, of all languages for my book to appear in, it has to seem pretty obscure to some of these writers, right?
Yeah, I think they love it. One of the things I enjoy the most in my job is packing the we, after the book is out, the contract says we have to send 8 or 10 or more, a certain amount of copies to the foreign publisher, and the publisher will send them to the author. It's pretty rare to send to the author directly, and I love doing those packagings. I make a neat little letter, and I make sure that it's sent pretty quickly, because I know that after they license, we make a contract. It's going to take like 1 or 2 or 3 or even sometimes 4 years until the book is out, and they sell rights in many countries, and to them it's more like paperwork. But then I know that the only tangible thing they will get is the book itself, and the author he might be more or less interested, but I think most of them will be very interested to see, okay, this is the Korean edition, and to them it will be. Usually there's no complaint about our covers, although I think some of our covers are really terrible. But there's no complaints because it's all so exotic. This Hangul is beautiful by itself.
Right, yeah.
So it's just to them is like, wow, it's something so new. If it's a familiar language, like your own book translated into Italian or Spanish, and you get the same kind of words, and you say, okay, well,
they use what it is.
They use the same cover, or they use the same font. It's not very interesting. Usually here it's a brand new cover with a different alphabet, so it is interesting itself. And I sometimes I try to put myself in the skin of the authors receiving the books, and I hope they like the covers. Yeah.
You say some of those covers are terrible, but tell me, I think Americans oftentimes don't care much they care too little about book design sometimes, and say the Japanese seem to care a whole lot about book design. How much do you think the Korean readership cares about the pure design of a book?
I think they care a lot, and publishers put a lot of care in book design. Well, the rest is a question of tastes, but there tends to be more illustration than photos, and it tends to be not so much font based, but more like drawn by hand, or illustrators would draw letters by hand. There's no rule, but a lot of care goes into book design, and I think the bar is pretty high. The level is pretty high here in Korea. I would think similar to the level of care that is given in Japan. I personally like the French type of approach. Like, one publisher has one kind of template,
Right.
and
Every time it's the same.
It's the same. It's just color and font, and to me it's very subtle, and I really like it because it makes the title and the power of the words of the words that are in the title gets through much.
It emphasizes that thing specifically. That's all that changes.
That's all there is the name of the author and the name of. But then what they do in France is they put a band around it with the name of the author, and that's pretty ugly. But I like, and then also of course they have those dust jacket with illustrations and or stuff. But I think I do prefer French book design in general because it's more subtle or sober. But in Korea there are some fantastic covers as well. Yeah. And in Japan, yes, the Japanese books are beautiful.
And finally, when I'm traveling, I always like to go to bookstores, or even when I'm in Los Angeles at home, we have some Korean bookstores I like to go to just experience them. And here in Seoul, I found it very exciting to go to bookstores, even if I don't intend on buying anything, or if the books are still too hard for me to read in Korean. I still get more of a charge, more excitement being in a bookstore here in Seoul than in other cities. Do you feel the same way? Are bookstores somehow more exciting the way I seem to think they are here in Seoul?
No, I had the same impression in the beginning. I was really excited to go to Kyobo
Yes.
whenever I could. And because there's so much to see, and in the bookstore where you know the language, there's already so much to see and to read. But when you don't know the language, paradoxically, it's makes it even more mysterious. And it's like a huge playground basically. But then now that when I go to a bookstore, I'm biased because of the work, and I'm always trying to look where. How come our books are so difficult to find?
Where's our books?
Yeah, where they should be here on the display, not in that shelf, and so on. So yes, I am kind of I have this professional syndrome of the guy But now, so it's not that I don't enjoy going to bookstores anymore, but I enjoy it in a different way, and I'm much more looking for our stuff, and I don't really discover new. I know the market quite well, and I don't really look for the darker corners of the Kyobo anymore.
Such as there are dark corners,
no,
but that's one thing you must have learned very well about Seoul. Because it is Seoul, there's going to be always a coffee shop, maybe more than one. Every bookstore you're in, right? You're never far from that.
Never far from that. Yeah, exactly. And
one of those things I'm happy to have discovered about Seoul, and I hope to discover as much as I can. And some of it I'll be doing through books, and I do hope to see more books from Open Books, which is the company that you are the acquiring editor at. I've been speaking, by the way, listeners, to Gregory Limpens. He is, as I say, the acquiring editor, and he's a big reader of many languages, maybe not so much Korean, but you'll probably, as time goes on, only read more in Korean in the future, right?
I really hope so, yes.
Gregory, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
This has been Notebook on Cities and Culture. I've been Colin Marshall, coming to you from above Itaewon here in Seoul, Korea. You can keep up with the cultural creators, internationalists, and observers of the urban scene on the show at colinmarshall.org. Thanks. And special thanks to all the backers of Notebook on Cities and Culture's Korea tour on Kickstarter. Adam Hartzell, Aidan Nullman, Alfred Lee, Andy Cooney, Angus Gordon, Bala Chenupati, Cam Smith, Chin Music Press, Dan Caraselli, Danny, Deborah Smith, Emmett Farragher, Umberto Grant, Ian Plosker, Ismail Kennedy, Jackie Gast, Jay Chang, Jeffrey Davis, James DeVito, Jonathan Filbert, Josh Paget, Kimberly Hahn, Manvir, Mark Hines, Matthew Workman, Maureen Kincaid Speller, Monica Eck, Michael Fransky, MJ Pritchett, Patrick O'Flaherty, Patrick Park, Piers Rippey, Robert Salzberg, Samuel Hansen, Sean Brown, Themistocles Chakrusis, Thomas Unterberger, Timothy Dobbs, and Wayne Wright.